Thank you.
But now this is also going on in the task.
Hello.
When
Hello.
Nancy was there.
Nike, can you hear me for Q&A?
Yes, I can hear
Hello.
you.
Okay, sounds good.
Good morning, friends and colleagues, and here in the room and online. Welcome to this event entitled Historic First, Tracking State Responses to Having a Feminist Woman, UN Secretary General, organized by the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, the Center for Global Affairs, School of Professional Studies at New York University, and one for 8 billion. My name is Mavic Cabrera Valleza. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, and I will be moderating our conversation this morning. Allow me to thank Bani Dugal, and I believe Lillian is here too. And their team, oh, hi Lillian. Their team here at the Baha'i International Communities UN office for allowing us to use their beautiful facilities. This discussion is being held in preparation for the 69th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, as we believe there will be more and there have to be more discussions on this issue. Before we begin the discussion, let me acknowledge she's supposed to be here. She'll be here soon. Our board member, Honorable Mary Lou McFedran, independent senator from Canada, and founding member of the GNWP's board of directors. To start us off in this very interesting conversation and deliver the opening remarks on behalf of NYU, and as well as to provide context to this research initiative, I would like to call on our dear friend, Professor Anne-Marie Getz from the Center for Global Affairs, School of Professional Studies at New York University. And Anne-Marie is also the advisor of the graduate students who conducted the research that will be presented today. Welcome, Anne-Marie. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mavic. Huge thanks to the Baha'i Center. This is gorgeous. I haven't been here for a while. That just shows you how behind the times I am. Hi, Senator. Welcome, everyone. I'm a professor at New York University. Just to give you the context, I'm going to give you a little bit of context for our discussion today, and then an explanation of where this research comes from. We all know that we're in a moment of enormous geopolitical crisis. Even words seem inadequate to describe the extent of the polycrises that we face. So the choice of what is often called the world's secular pope is very, very important. The choice of the next SG. A decision will be made about who that person is at some point in 2025. Now, in view of the incredibly meaningful role that the leader of the UN will play, it's remarkable that there is such vagueness, such a lack of clarity on how the secular pope will be elected. And the selection process has in fact often been described or compared to the conclave in Rome, where nobody really knows what goes on in that closed room. Ben might be talking about this in a moment because One for 8 Billion, which he created and heads, deals with this issue of the fact that there are no rules except that we're told that the Security Council makes a recommendation to the General Assembly. And we don't know how nominations happen, when they're supposed to happen. There's no clear timeline. There's no set of qualifications or criteria for the leader of the United Nations. As one person who is in an organization who is challenging all of this, an organization called the Atlas Movement, which is looking at choosing a leader. She pointed out there's no clear rules, but the other problem is if there were, they probably wouldn't be good rules. So this is the situation that we're in. Part of this process has been a lack of clear attention to issues of diversity and inclusion and equality historically. There have been 9 male secretary generals in the past 80 years. Well, prior to the selection in 2016, there had only ever been 2 women candidates, apparently. And I say apparently because, of course, there's a lot of obscurity about the process. In 2016, there were 7 extremely qualified women competing, and still the choice went to a man. This whole process of thinking that it's high time that a woman should lead the ESG is significant and will require distinct efforts and perhaps definitely actions to make the selection of a woman more likely. However, I would like to point out that it's wishful thinking to suppose that the choice of one woman is going to solve the world's problems or turn the UN around. It's in fact desperate thinking to think that way. It's just like thinking that governments will be less corrupt if more women are appointed. Maybe, but women by virtue of their gender alone can't fix everything. So the selection of the next SG has to be tied to ideas about UN reform, not just effectiveness, but sticking to the UN's principles. One of those principles linked to the human rights framework is gender equality. And therefore, there is an interest in what we're discussing today in whether and how member states are going to ensure that gender equality issues go beyond just choosing a woman. And so another word for that is looking for a feminist SG, which is a controversial idea, but it's in the research that we're going to describe. And then the final concern, of course, that we all share is that we're looking at potentially a phenomenon of a glass cliff, that we might be appointing a woman to fail horrifically, and it will be blamed on her gender, among other things. And so therefore, the appointment process has got to be tied to broader efforts to reaffirm the UN's commitment to human rights and gender equality, particularly in an era of authoritarianism and autocratization, where gender equality has come under attack. That's all I'm going to say about the context. Very quickly, the Center for Global Affairs, where I work, some of our classes are called consulting practicums. This is hands-on, real-world learning. Our longtime partner in this effort has been the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, where students work with the GNWP on a project that they define. This year, they asked for more depth, more complexity, more texture on the issue of how and whether to select a woman SG. And the students came up with a wide variety of products. Can the students who were in the practicum put your hands up quickly, please? Okay, so we've got some representation. There were 3 others, I think, that were involved. And what's going to happen today is we're going to present one of the products, which is a really valuable research tool, the tracker of how member states feel about choosing a woman SG and what are they prepared to do about it. I would say that in the process of doing this, we interviewed Ben over here from 1 for 8 billion, who had been also in the process of doing exactly the same thing. So we've been collaborating with him, and he's brought a huge amount of rigor to this process, for which we're extremely grateful. And I am going to stop there and hand it over to the representative, Claudette Segura, of the students, unless I'm supposed to hand over to you, Mavic.
Yes, to me.
Oh, sorry, Mavic, go ahead.
To introduce Claudette.
Okay.
Okay, I will continue that and to add to the introduction of Claudette, who is an MS in Global Affairs candidate at NYU, graduate student consultant at the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, and one of the most hardworking graduate students I've ever met. Claudette will present the findings from the tracking of member state statements on electing a woman as the next UN Secretary General. And in her presentation, she will speak about the summary of the research methodology, present the database and interactive map and the results and recommendations from this undertaking. We're very excited to hear from you, Claudette. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mavic. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm really excited to be talking to you today. As Mavic said, my name is Claudette, and I'm going to be speaking on tracking the state positions on a woman UN Secretary General. Just a quick, oops, let's see. Maybe I can just, okay, there you go. It's being a little slow, so let's hope that this works. So just a quick agenda. I'm going to go through the introduction, then I'll share the background. I'll share also the tracker in the form of the spreadsheet and the visualization tool that we have. Then I'll explain a little bit about the results, the findings, and then I'll share the recommendations with you. So just as Anne-Marie was mentioning, we are a group of students that were in this practicum course. We started in September of 2024. We've been working on this for about 6 months now. And as we know, the UN is now 80 years old, or almost 80 years old. And it's been 80 years of only male secretary generals. Only a few women have ever been nominated, and none of them have ever been selected to date. So this decision is made by member states. So we decided to take a look at how they feel about electing a woman secretary general. So we want to see who is saying what, and we have used official statements or statements by regional bodies to see this. And I'm going to show you what we did. Let's just hope that this starts super slow. I want to show you the methodology next. Give me 1 sec. Sorry about that. Let me just stop the screen sharing. Maybe that will help. Okay, so let's just keep it like this. That way, maybe it won't be slow. So we have here the summary of the methodology. I want to share this first so you understand why we've been tracking the statements the way that we have been doing it. So on the right side, on the left side, you can see the classification, and that is color coded. The strongest classification that we have is a very strong one. Those are the statements that, of course, mention that we should have a woman SG, but they, in addition, also specify concrete actions aimed at achieving the appointment of a woman SG, and that could include some steps to ensure the nomination of women candidates. Then a lower classification level would be the strong classification, which is in lighter green. And those are statements that also emphasize following through on institutional commitments on gender equality. They do mention that they do want a woman SG, but these statements don't really offer any action proposal there. So that's why they are not very strong. And then in orange, you can see the indirect or implied as a classification, which are statements that do acknowledge gender as a consideration, but they don't explicitly advocate for a woman SG. And then in red, you can see opposed. Opposed is a category that, of course, as the name says, are statements that express support for male candidates only or explicitly rejects prioritizing the selection of a woman SG. Then we have the no mention category, which are states that might not say any mention about the SG selection process, or they might do, but they don't mention any gender considerations in that. And now I'm going to show you the tracker. The tracker is the biggest part of this. This is where we do all of our coding. This is where we have all of our maps. Let me just open it right here. Oh, this is not the tracker. Sorry. Just 1 second. Always tech issues here. This is the statements tracker. As we can see, it's, all the countries there by alphabetical order, then their support classification, and then the quote statement. As I mentioned, this is where myself and my colleagues did all of the coding of the statements. We would analyze and of course, select their classification, etc. We have been tracking different statements. We started doing ONGA 79. We did the ad hoc working group meeting from November 4th. We did WPS from October 2024. And finally, we did the fourth event, which was the ad hoc working group from February 20th. That happened just maybe 2 weeks ago, 15 days ago, even less. So this is what fits the map. And now I'm going to show you the tracker here. This is the main part of our research, of course, what I think many people are excited to see because, of the visualization and the impact that it has, just visually. So as I mentioned before, this is the different classifications. I have them on the right. You might not be able to see them very well, but you can see them later on. And I'm going to show you an example here. I'm from Mexico, so I'm going to go ahead and show you Mexico's example here. Mexico was classified as a strong country it's a light green color. And the quote that got them this classification, I guess it's this one from February 20th from the group of countries on gender rotation for equality initiative, which is a joint statement that they gave on behalf of 61 countries. And this was coordinated by Mexico, Slovenia, and Spain. And the part, or one of the most important parts here, is that they were strongly encouraging all member states to support the selection of the first Madam Secretary General, but they didn't give any actions. That's why we weren't able to put them in the very strong classification. And we have other examples here. I can mention Norway, for example, which is a very strong country. It's classified as very strong. Also, during the ad hoc working group meeting from February 20th, they gave this joint statement with the ACT group, and they said that the ACT group calls on member states to consider only nominating women. So that is a very strong statement because they are suggesting that only women should be considered for the SG position. And this is already live, so later on we'll be sharing, a QR code so you can scan it and visualize it. I think it's probably maybe on your tables now, but just to not get distracted, we can see it later. And let me just go back to the presentation now. So now what I want to show to you is the key findings. We want to see numbers here, right? So the very strong classification is 28 countries. The strong classification is 64 countries. 88 countries were classified as indirect and implied, and 1 is opposed, and 12 countries still have not made any mention. So if we want to see it in percentages, that is the very strong classification is a 14.5%. The strong classification is at 33%. Indirect or implied 45%, no mention 6%, and opposed 0.5%. So as we can see here, the majority of the world's countries are aware that the male's monopoly on the Secretary General's role is not right, but only a few appear to determined to do something about this. And now I want to deep dive in this, each of the classifications. So I'm going to share each of them a little bit. The very strong classification that I said has 28 countries. And I want to share another example, Costa Rica. They gave this statement on November 4th on the ad hoc working group meeting. They said that the General Assembly could refuse to accept a candidate, urging the Security Council to recommend a more inclusive group of candidates. So they are giving another specific action here that it's refuse a candidate to recommend a more inclusive group. And we have, again, the ACT group statement by about 27 countries below. That is the one that I just mentioned before, only nominating women, suggesting to only nominate women candidates. And now just another picture of the map with the names of the countries. I know that this is a little small, so maybe this presentation can be shared later on, of course. And I'm going to go ahead and share another example from the strong classification. Namibia said that they hope that the United Nations will have a female Secretary General in the country in the near future. Sorry. And this was a statement shared at the UNGA 79 in September of 2024. And the group of countries on gender rotation for equality initiative, which is 64 countries, they said what I just mentioned before, that they strongly encourage all member states to support the selection of the first Madam Secretary General. Again, this is a classification that does say we should have a Secretary General, a woman, but doesn't specify actions. That's why it's just strong and not very strong. And now when I go to the next slide, which is just an image of the country, of the different countries in the different classifications. I'm sorry, in the strong classification. And I wanted to share with you the indirect or implied map. This is the map for them. And one example is the statement that Japan shared. They are committed to the selection and appointment process with due regard to gender balance. They do not mention that they want a woman secretary general, but they do mention gender balance there. So that's why this is indirect. Just as well as the non-aligned movement share a group statement during the November 4th meeting, where they were saying that they welcome the reference in Resolution 77334 that there is yet to be a woman secretary general. As we can see here, they were just quoting a statement that was shared in the past. This wasn't something that they originally mentioned, so that's why we decided to classify them as indirect. And again, the following slide is just the different countries that we have in the indirect classification. There you go. Okay. And now the opposed category, it's opposed. I'm sorry, it's one country. One second. Do we still have some there? Some still there. Sorry about that. So the next category is opposed. We have one country there, which is Russia. They said that they acknowledge that gender is one of the criteria, but they also mentioned that it should not play a decisive role. So that's why we decided to include them in the opposed category. They mentioned that the gender should not be considered. So this was their statement that was just recently shared in the February 20th ad hoc working group on the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly. This was their third meeting. And last but not least, we have the no mention category, which is about 12 countries that have not said anything on regards to the selection of a woman SG or anything in regards to this. So it's 12 countries, some of them such as Argentina and China, very small, very big countries, but there's also other smaller countries there. And now to finalize, I want to share some of the recommendations that I prepared for you. I suggest that we should start with transferring the indirect support into action. This is encouraging the states that are within the indirect category to adopt a clearer, a stronger language and convert this implicit endorsement into more explicit advocacy. We should also be engaging with the no mention states. As I just mentioned, 12 of them are still or have not mentioned anything about this. So engaging them in dialogue and share so they can share their opinions on gender equality at the SG level would be very helpful. Maybe even sharing the map with them could be a way to start the conversation there. Another recommendation would be to address the opposition. We have one country there, so maybe develop a strategy to negotiate with the opposition would be ideal, would be good. And then next would be build a coalition. We have, as I just mentioned, 28 countries in the very strong category, 64 on the strong. So making sure that we strengthen these alliances among these two groups can make, or influence other member states to say something about it. Last but not least, we need a feminist woman as Secretary General, not only just a woman, but a feminist woman, who is gonna, or we should be encouraging candidates to address this anti-gender backlash that we've seen in recent events and outline their track record in defending gender equality. So this is all from my side. Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Claudette, for that very comprehensive and informative presentation. And I just would like to support both your presentation and Anne-Marie before you, that this call for a woman Secretary General is not entirely new. But the good news is that there's increasing support. But even better, we want those statements of support, especially those very general statements to translate them into action. So that's why our first recommendation is translate those indirect support to concrete action. We really need to, and the world needs to see a woman, a feminist woman on the top leadership position in this, in global governance. And now we've been talking about member state statement. And I now would like to call on a representative of a member state who's been also supportive of this initiative. And we have with us the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Estonia, Ms. Crystal Luke. Welcome, Deputy Representative. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And we are very supportive of the civil society to participate in this discussion and also contribute, including in identifying the qualified candidates for the next Secretary General. So that's why we were very happy to accept your invitation to this event. So let me give you a little overview of how this call for nominating women candidates has developed among the member states. There has definitely been an increasing push for this already, I would say for the last 5 years at least. So the UN revitalization resolution in 2021 already is mentioning that there is yet to be a woman Secretary General and invites member states to bear this in mind in the future when nominating candidates for the position of the Secretary General. The next revitalization resolution in 2023, so 2 years later, has even stronger language on this, and it is saying that it is strongly encouraging member states to bear this in mind. So the language went from invites to strongly encouraging, which is during the member state negotiations, this is quite a big development. So since 2023, the call for nominating women candidates has even increased even more. The CETO 165 state parties have determined to reach the equal and inclusive representation of women in decision-making systems. In the ACT group here in New York, it's 27 countries. Estonia is part of it. We have been calling to consider only nominating women candidates. I mean, that happened in 20th of February, just recently. And Estonia also joined the joint statement that was already mentioned here. I believe this time there were 61 countries. 60?
Yeah, it was the one by Slovenia, Spain.
Yes.
Yeah, 64.
64. Okay, 64 countries. So three additional,
Yes.
I guess, after the meeting. So 64 countries joined this statement that called for strongly encouraging that strongly encouraged all member states to support the selection of the first Madam Secretary General. So you can see there has been a big push for it, and I'm also very grateful for this the presentation you just made. Gives a good overview where the countries are in this. But in addition to nominating women secretary general, let me also emphasize on a few points that are important for Estonia and to increase the transparency of the overall process of the selection and appointment of the secretary general. So as was mentioned in the beginning of this event, was that this is a little bit, this has been a little bit not untransparent. The transparency increased in 2016 and 2016 process, but there is still room for further increase of transparency. So we think that the Secretary General election and nomination appointment process should have a clear timeline. All the candidates must be nominated at least by one member state. And the letter calling for nominations should also have some criteria in it. So the clear timeline that we have been proposing with the ACT group, the Accountability, Coherence, Transparency group, is starting in October of the year preceding appointment with a joint letter, then have a clear cutoff time for the nominations, which we would suggest be 1st of April of the appointment year. And by the end of June, the General Assembly should have heard all the hearings with candidates. And the deadline for the Security Council recommendation should be 1st of October, so that the candidate that is elected would have time to prepare for the job. And we think that all the candidates should be communicated publicly, so that, I mean, civil society, the general public could also have an overview of what is going on with this selection process. And one important aspect for us is also that the candidates should disclose any funding sources relating to their candidatures. And this is also mentioned in the last resolution, revitalization resolution. So we also think that the role of the General Assembly should be enforced, should be stronger. And one aspect to consider is also whether the Security Council could propose multiple candidates to the General Assembly. We think the General Assembly should have informal dialogues with candidates and hearings, and the format could be improved. It could be more interactive, including with the civil society, so that there could be questions and answers, and the stronger involvement of civil society. And we also propose to consider to assess the General Assembly's support to the candidate that the Security Council is recommending to the General Assembly. And then that there are like different ways that this could be done, but one option could be to have secret advisory votes or a similar mechanism to see how big is the support of the General Assembly. And before making the final decision on the Secretary General, we think that the General Assembly should do additional hearings. It means between Security Council recommendation and the appointment in the General Assembly. And this is, I think, is all from my side. So I give the word back.
Thank you very much, DPR, for adding more critical information on the process of the selection of the Secretary General, and also particularly our advocacy for the next Secretary General to be a woman. I now would like to call on Andrea Ortega, the Strategy and Communication Specialist at Global Women Leaders Voices, another important group in this discussion for electing the the next UN Secretary General, particularly a woman. Andrea, yeah, please add into the conversation on how far have you gone into the advocacy on this issue and the latest plans that you have at Global Women Leaders Voices. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for this presentation. So first, for those who don't know, I wanted to tell briefly that GWL Voices is an organization of 76 global women leaders with extensive experience in multilateralism dedicated to promoting gender equality and inclusive governance. But for the purpose of this conversation, I wanted to highlight 3 things that I think about GWL Voices that are relevant when we're talking about the MS statement tracker. So the first is that we are an evidence-based organization. So we leverage data, research, and policy analysis to advocate for systemic change and ensure that women's leadership is prioritized at the highest level, which is why we develop our report, Women in Multilateralism, and we're about to launch the new edition, but it's also why we're happy to participate in different initiatives that follow this logic, just like the tracker. So the second reason is that we work not only with partners with common interest, like all of you, but also with the member states. And this combination is the one that allows us to build bridges between feminist movements and decision makers and amplify our collective impact, which is exactly what we need and we just saw. And the third reason is that our vision is a world where women voices and leadership are fully represented at all levels of decision making, especially in multilateral institutions. And this tool can help, which also leads me to one of our key campaigns, a share campaign that is very relevant for the tracker, which is the Madam Secretary General campaign. So GWL Voices was founded for 3 out of the 7 female candidates for the UNSG position in 2016. All very capable candidates, several campaigns on Madam Secretary General, dozens of headlines, thousands of comments on social media. And all of this momentum did not translate into a female SG. So despite the current Secretary General has been an advocate for the campaign as well, it seems that the world and like we the peoples are not ready to have a female at the helm of the United Nations. However, in this current geopolitical scenario, where unprecedented seems to be the trend topic word of the latest event, the call for Madam Secretary General is not only about gender parity. It is about securing the best possible leadership for the UN at a time of global uncertainty, just like we heard before. Why? Well, the need for a Secretary General who can navigate crisis, rebuild trust in multilateralism, and drive effective action has never been greater. And women leaders have been consistently demonstrated pragmatic problem-solving, consensus building, and resilience in times of uncertainty, qualities that are essential for strengthening the UN's role in global governance. Their ability to foster inclusive decision-making, mediate conflicts, and implement result-driven policies makes them well-suited to lead this crucial moment. So we're not just talking about women in general. Because being a feminist leader means also advocating for equality, for inclusion, for fairness, and for sustainability. So it is about ensuring that the UN is led by someone who understands that gender equality is not just a goal, but a prerequisite for peace, development, and global stability. We believe that a feminist UN Secretary General could bring a much-needed focus on gender equality, ensuring that all global policies and initiatives integrate a gender lens, rather than treating it just as an afterthought. And these are precisely the qualities needed to revitalize the UN's role in global governance and reinforce its legitimacy in the 21st century. So about the tool you're launching here today, personally, I do research and I do discourse analysis. So I was very interested in the MS statement tracker. I believe it's a tremendous job and kudos to all the team for that. And thanks to the team, we just learned the scope that they cover. And in light of the latest events, I dare to say that all of us will be very interesting to see how the tracker evolves within the next months, how the conversation changes. And moreover, I believe that in an era where infoxication became the new normal, and we are constantly reading statements and following high-level meetings, the statement, this tracker, makes some of these things much more accessible to all. So as an evidence-based initiative, we applaud it because I think it will fill an important space in the conversation. It will help to inform civil society on both progress and areas where more engagement is needed. And these current findings show, just like our insights, that momentum is building, but they also reminded us that many countries remain on the sidelines or have not even made their position clear. So as GWL Voices, we will continue working alongside 148 Billion, the global network of women peacebuilders, and NYU Center of Global Affairs, and all the organizations that are working for the first Madam Secretary General to ensure that gender equality remains a key priority in the UNSG selection process. And at the same time, we will continue working to see in this next CSW more commitments that go beyond rhetoric to action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for emphasizing again to translate the rhetoric to translate the rhetoric into action, and that we don't want to see another 5 years or a decade not having a woman in the top leadership of the UN. And now I would like to call on one of our the other co-organizer of this event, who is Ben Donaldson, Head of Campaigns for the UNA, United Nations Association UK, where he helped found 1.8 billion, a global movement campaigning for a fair, open, and inclusive process to appoint the first woman UN Secretary General. To Ben, we would like to add your thoughts to this very critical conversation.
Thank you so much, Mavic. And just on in terms of my association with the UN AUK, the UN Association, I'm now the former head of campaigns there and throwing myself in behind the 148 Billion campaign at the moment. So thank you. It's great to see so many friends, so many colleagues. Thank you, Dan, and the Baha'i international community for, as always, lending your amazing facilities for today's conversation. I want to start by just addressing one of the elephants in the room, and that's the US rollback on rights. And it's happening so fast, it's almost hard to keep up. But we've already seen just over the past few weeks, the US slashing programs that promote gender ideology in inverted commas, and as well as gender equality. We've seen this happening in UNICEF, UN Women, and ECOSOC already. And I think yesterday, the US called a vote on the SDGs and cited a need for course correction on the goals on both gender and climate, again, ideologies and inverted commas. So the US ended by saying they reject and denounce the SDGs and Agenda 2030. So this is like the new reality that we're facing, and it's going to collide with the SDG selection process. We're starting to hear about self-censorship of words like diversity, trans rights, feminist, inclusion, even gender equality in UN documents as well as in civil society. According to Reuters, prior to a recent WFP executive board meeting, the program's Gender Protection and Inclusion Services sent a note to colleagues warning them to use descriptive language instead of specific nomenclature about diversity in the light of the recent White House announcements. So 148 Billion will not be removing our call for a feminist UNSG from our website. We reject the premise of those calls for such self-censorship because it's never just about language. Censorship creates this void into which steps the sort of spin and the propaganda of the oppressive force, the oppressive force will step in to fill. You can see it happening on other issues like Israel and Palestine is a prominent example. The fear that by calling out Israel's genocidal war or talking about apartheid, there will be some sort of reprisal or career cost. Self-censorship has a chilling effect which deters people from speaking out. And a similar dynamic could infect the call for a feminist woman SG. During today's debate, we're talking about the rights of women and girls, but it could just as well be trans rights, a free press, civic space, Afghan rights in the face of the Taliban laws, Palestinian rights or refugee rights. And if you let one of these issues go, you're likely going to be undermining someone who doesn't have the luxury of whether or not to choose to support these rights or not. So we're not going to build cross-movement solidarity that way. We're not going to build a coalition. We're not going to ultimately be able to stand up to the powerful forces we're trying to stand up to. So let's have a look at our coalition. We have these 92 strong supporters, strong or very strong supporters for a women SG at present, just 2 against. Although the US has not officially been classified in that opposition group yet, because the scope of the research, as we've heard from Claudette, doesn't yet cover those debates that the US has made those statements in. But despite the US and Russia, the overall direction of travel is very positive, with many states giving their most forceful support for a women SG on the 20th of February. It's interesting to note that this was 2 weeks after Trump started trying to dismantle the UN's gender policies. So these sort of these particularly forceful statements could be seen from the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, as well as from the ACT Coalition and Brazil, for example. So they have actually taken a route that's going upwards in terms of their weight behind this issue. But we can't take this support for granted unless states and civil society are vigilant and intentional. It may very well not translate to a women SG, as we've heard before. There are already signs of possible cracks. So Slovenia, Spain, and Mexico's first statement on women's representation in senior appointments was endorsed by 78 states. That was back in November last year. Now, their statement on February, a couple of weeks ago, was supported by 64. So we're seeing this slight drop off. It may not be related to an actual sort of desire to roll back and push away from this issue, but it's interesting to note there could be that undercurrent. How can we get prepared? Well, the One for 8 Billion campaign is a global civil society network. We work with states, with parliamentarians, and with campaigners. And we're calling for a much more open selection process with a larger role for the General Assembly, because this is all linked, as we heard from the ambassador, that actually a more open process is absolutely central to this project. Current politics make it even more important. A more open process would enable the successful candidate to build momentum behind their vision. And this is crucial because it's that ability to gain a broad-based support from the wider UN membership, not just from the P5, from civil society, from parliaments, and crucially just from the general public. So they need that exposure, that ability to campaign in public, and that ability to reach beyond that very small constituency in the Security Council. That's how they can increase their mandates, their legitimacy, their mandate to lead, and they can take forward that momentum with them and make it much harder for the Security Council to fob them off. On the appointment itself, the UN Charter is clear that the GA is in the driving seat, that the GA is responsible for this appointment. So this is important that the GA asserts itself and uses the upcoming resolution in order to make sure that it is in that driving seat. There's a lot of concern about the Security Council being able to discharge its duties right now across a whole number of issues. And very few people are convinced about the ability of the permanent members to recommend a candidate who will serve the entire UN membership and the world's 8 billion people. Therefore, we're asking GA member states to use the upcoming resolution to unequivocally endorse the appointment of a women SG and actually pass a resolution that will get the entire UN membership into the very strong category. Establish a bigger role for civil society in the process, greater scrutiny on campaign financing, as we've heard, insist on an end to the backroom deals where candidates become compromised during the campaign trail, far more interaction with candidates, moving away from a single podium moment, which tends to play into the hands of the alpha male coded sort of podium performance, which after all is a terrible way to assess someone's ability to run the UN, and move towards a more sustained set of interactive hearings, thematic hearings, supplementary questions, and it also encourage candidates to participate with civil society in town halls. We also want to insist on, we want to hear the General Assembly insist on a meaningful choice. This is within the competence of the General Assembly. They can ask the Security Council for more than one candidate, not just a single one to rubber stamp. But perhaps most importantly, the GA needs an ability, a moment that's prepared in advance in order to state its preferred choice of candidates. So this could be by establishing straw polls in the General Assembly. We already have them in the Security Council. The GA is in charge of this appointment. Why should the Security Council have the straw polls and get to talk about which their preferred candidate is, but the General Assembly doesn't have that option? And we have in the previous selection process, well, the 2016 selection process, we had many member states pointing out the link between the General Assembly performance of candidates and the outcome. So you had people like Samantha Power linking the performance of candidates and almost just divining out of thin air that the General Assembly all got behind Antonio Guterres. Now, I'm not saying that that wasn't true, but I am saying that that wasn't a very scientific process to determine the level of support in the General Assembly. So it would be good to have something far more tangible on that front. What if the Security Council just ignores this? Well, there's 92 strong supporters for a women SG. It's within their gift to say no and to actually push back on the Security Council and reject a candidate that is put forward. So the GA could ask the Security Council to think again. It could point blank say, well, we need a short list of candidates to choose between, and anything other than that, we won't be making a decision. If the Security Council still doesn't listen and tries to force a candidate, well, 1 for 8 billion this is the hard question. 1 for 8 billion is doing research on this scenario at the moment, but it is interesting to note the example of the extension of Tariq Lee's term, which happened, which was extended without the support of the Security Council at a time when that Secretary General did not have the support of the permanent members of the Security Council. So there are precedents. 1 for 8 billion will be releasing a briefing on this in the future. The important point is that the SG has a pivotal role to push for gender equality and defend the UN. We've got to get this appointment right. We need to find someone who can squeeze every bit of normative power that the UN has and can communicate and bring the public along with them. It's a very tough gig. And of course, we've heard about the glass cliff from Anne-Marie earlier. But the principle stands that the General Assembly should only appoint a candidate it is confident will be able to rise to the challenge before the UN. My final point is that states need to be ready for an uncomfortable ride. Spoken with a lot of states this week and in recent weeks, and understandably they're regressing into sort of tentative mode where they're figuring out how to position themselves with the new US dynamic. And there's this strong instinctive desire to try to do all this by consensus, as it has been done in the past. The new reality may make this instinct just not work. It's an instinct that states could it's an instinct that states could follow off the edge of a cliff. This instinct could very well mean going along with the appointment of a candidate that is an anti-feminist, an anti-UN candidate, and destroying the UN is not a price worth paying for UN consensus. In conclusion, civil society, member states, and the public need to work together, get prepared, and build a strong coalition for a feminist women leader who we can all support and be a vital part of the resistance. If all of us have the first Madam Secretary General's back, this is how we can make the impossible gig a difficult but feasible gig, and one which could make progress on the raft of issues facing the world's 8 billion people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, for speaking to the difficult and strange realities that we face. 2 members of the Security Council currently decisive in the selection of the Secretary General, pushing back the hardest on gender equality and promoting anti-feminist and anti-people view on this issue. And the big contradiction that they, as members of the Permanent 5 in the Security Council, have a greater say in the selection of the Secretary General. And meanwhile, what does it mean, or what does it say in terms of the role of the General Assembly and civil society? Thank you very much. And I forgot to mention that Ben also has another platform where he furthered this advocacy, and that is as co-editor of Blue Smoke, an initiative in partnership with Pass Blue. We have Dulce there, the executive director and editor of Pass Blue, to strengthen transparency and accountability around appointment of senior leadership in the UN. I now am very happy to turn to our audience members. And we have about 15 minutes to do that. We'll collect a number of questions at a time, and we'll ask our panelists to respond. And for our online participants, please put your questions on the chat box, and our team here in the room will read them out aloud. But before I continue, I would like to acknowledge again the Honorable Mary Lou McFedran, Independent Senator from Canada, who is attending other important meetings, but took time to join us today. Mary Lou is also a founding board secretary of the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders. Thank you for joining us, Mary Lou. I now would like to call on someone who can speak to the possibility or what we need to do to encourage the General Assembly to look into adopting a resolution. We have no other than Ambassador Admiral Chowdhury. For those who are not aware, Ambassador Chowdhury played a historic and conceptual breakthrough on the Women, Peace and Security agenda, particularly the UN Security Council resolution on women, peace and security, when he was the permanent representative and ambassador of Bangladesh to the UN. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you. Thank you, Maureen, for giving me or asking me to say a few words. I think this has been a passion for me for a long time. I remember when Ban Ki-moon was endorsed, or rather elected for the second term, I wrote that Ban Ki-moon's legacy is not that much to say about or speak about. So he can create a legacy for himself by resigning mid-term for a woman Secretary General to replace him. I say that is the only way he can get a place in history. But anyway, and the title of that article was Elusive Woman Secretary General of the United Nations. Well, some reality check. I appreciated listening to all the presentations here, but we have to also be realistic about what it is. First reality check is that the Charter wants Security Council involvement to recommend, and the General Assembly approves the recommendation. So that is how it is. So we cannot change the process by asking for the General Assembly to take the lead. Well, what I believe can be done is to have, given the fact that 90+ countries are in favor of a woman Secretary General, to have a resolution before Security Council decision to say our preference that Security Council acts to nominate a woman Secretary General for us to endorse. And that is, I think, one. But I should say a little bit further. If Security Council nominates a man, the General Assembly should be ready to reject it, not approve automatically. They say that, and that is the only way to teach a lesson to the Security Council, which is dominated by permanent members. Not 5 of them. Actually, Secretary General's decision is taken by P1. For the last few Secretaries General, it was one country which dominated the process. And in 2016, it is the 2 countries who changed the whole structure of having some very prominent and good women leaders in the candidacy to deny them. And they went for Guterres to become the Secretary General. And this is Russia and America. Interesting combination, but they decided on a man, an European man. And so I believe that European Union was also a party to this deal. And that is what happened, and we have to understand that. Secondly, second reality check is there is no transparency in the process. We can have transparency in the General Assembly, maybe more open, but in the Security Council, with 5 permanent members meeting, even in their missions, they don't meet in the United Nations, quietly decide not only the choice of the Secretary General or the admission of new members or any other Security Council resolution, they decide beforehand what is their position. So there is no transparency. And with the leadership in the 2 countries that I mentioned for 2016, we have no expectation. I think the reality is that there will be no transparency. It will be decided on a very personal process of consultation. Thirdly, I believe that it is very important for not only the member states, there has to be a big civil society movement for a woman Secretary General. Worldwide, every NGO should be asked to make a statement, and there is a coalition. We remember how the member states refused to accept a landmines treaty. But Jody Williams organized hundreds of NGOs coming together, and finally member states agreed to that. And so that is where, we will ask not only for the member states to support, but NGO, there should be a global movement, a sort of encouragement from the NGOs for the leadership. Next reality is that member states do not nominate women candidates. Except in 2016, we have said that there are 4 areas where this can be done by member states, not by an agreement. Firstly, President of the General Assembly, only 5 so far, or 4, I think, out of 79 presidents. And then member states have not nominated any woman for that post over the years. Rarely it is done. Secondly, I said that the intergovernmental bodies of the UN, like Human Rights Council, ECOSOC has better record, but Human Rights Council and other places, women are not elected to head that intergovernmental body. And that is one. And then thirdly, women ambassadors. That is the prerogative of the member states. We have only maybe now 50. We reached 50 2 years ago, and then now there is an attrition. Women ambassadors have been replaced by men. And that's a pity. Again, we have gone beyond, below 50% of the membership. So these are the realities. And fourth is that member states should appoint or nominate women candidates. That is, before 2016, I don't think there was any woman candidate. So that is the reality. Member states should flood the field with nominations. Good, bad, I don't mind, but it should be woman candidates. That is important. And it's very interesting. Here is the point. In many cases, when I speak about woman candidate, first question comes from the crowd. Do you have a good woman candidate in mind? And I say, you didn't ask that when Ban Ki-moon was elected, when Kofi Annan was elected, all the men were elected. We didn't talk about their qualifications. We just knew that there is a support. He is a high-level person, and that's it. So that is very important. We should not go on saying, but one criteria which I very strongly support is feminist candidate. And that is very important. I think not only it's a woman's issue, but it's an issue of humanity. Feminism is not just for women against men or men against women. It is something that we should, and I think as Mavic knows very well, and Anne-Marie also, I am proud to be a feminist. And I think all of us need to be. And that is the way our world can be a better place. So that's why I think this point is very important, that only criteria is whether you are a feminist or not. And woman candidate, of course. That is, so these are the realities, and I believe that General Assembly can play a role by adopting a resolution before the Security Council decision, and if it is a man nominated by Security Council, reject that man. Reject. I think we have to mobilize countries to do that. And that is the best way to pass a message. And we have been, I know this will be a rough ride in 2026, after 10 years. Again, the United States will not be able to, and Russia is declared to be, Russia is even against 1325. Women, Peace and Security Resolution. We had a big fight before it was adopted, but they still continue to drag their feet on implementation of 1325. So bottom line is that let's be realistic, let's be pragmatic, let's work out not only on the member states, but civil society. A big civil society movement should be there. Groundswell of that movement should be there. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Ambassador, for your wisdom in advising us on the strategy, that we need to be realistic, pragmatic, but at the same time bold in our call for a feminist woman Secretary General and mobilizing, as big, a movement as possible, and working with supportive member states. I thank you so much. And I would like to go back to our audience members, and I believe Joanne Sander would like to take the floor and also share her insights and initiative on this matter.
Thank you so much, Mavic, and thank you to NYU and GNWP and everybody for convening this meeting and amazing research. And thank you, Ambassador Chowdhury, for your comments. Just to say, I'm a member of a group called Diplomats Without Borders, which is nearly 100 former ambassadors, multilateral leaders, etc., majority men, I will say. And just to illustrate how galvanizing this work is, I shared with them the notice about this meeting and the research, and they immediately responded with drafting a statement of support. I think that they will ultimately all agree to support this. And I think that is an example of exactly what you were saying, Ambassador Chowdhury, how we need to reach out to all the networks we're a part of, including the unusual suspects, and get written statements and verbal statements of support to really start a groundswell of support for this idea and all of the very specific proposals that you're making. So thank you, Mavic, for allowing me to contribute that.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And we're waiting to see the final statement from the Diplomats Without Borders, and a very important part of this groundswell of support for our call for a feminist woman as the next UN Secretary General. Any more questions, comments, interventions from our audience members and online? Barbara, yes.
Thank you so much, Mavik. And Ambassador Chowdhury, I've had the pleasure of meeting you before. You are a person, culture of peace. Your initiative is a worldwide phenomenon, actually. And everyone in this room, wonderful to see all of you and the brain work that goes on in order to get this movement in place. My question to whoever is I guess the most knowledgeable, who was, do you think, the best Secretary General? What were the facets about his personality and his effectiveness? And what can we learn and perhaps identify that woman? We've got to identify that woman or these women so that we have some kind of offering to civil society, not just a generalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, for that question. Mary Lou, yeah.
Be able to speak loudly enough. You all hear me okay?
But they want online.
Yes, of course, for the online. Thank you. Mary Lou McFedrin from Canada. I'm fascinated by and appreciate, Anne-Marie, your comment about this may be a glass cliff. Those of us who've been around for a while have seen this happen. We know it's not just hypothetical. And I'd love to hear thoughts on how civil society can try to be ready for the moments when one is at the edge of the cliff, if we do get there. And Ambassador, great to see you here.
Thank you so much for that question, Mary Lou. Sophia, may I ask you to read the question from our participants online?
Yes. So we have one question for Claudette. My country of Trinidad and Tobago, color indicate indirect. Can this be changed between now and when the vote is taking place? And another question, are the USA statements still representative of the current administration's position? Thank you.
Okay, I now turn over to our panel. Claudette, would you like to take the question directed to you?
Yeah, I guess I could take that one. So yeah, Trinidad and Tobago were classified as indirect. And we are gonna keep tracking for other different statements that are gonna be released between now and then. So yeah, I guess that would very depend on them. If they, of course, they release a stronger statement, it would be great to have that from them. So, but yes, definitely, we expect that this is gonna continue to evolve, and we would love to see countries, change their classifications, give out stronger statements, as we mentioned on the recommendations, creating alliances, and those that are indirect create or have a more proactive involvement here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anne-Marie, there was one question directed to you.
Sure, I'll answer the question about the glass cliff in a second. Mary Lou's vanished. Oh, you're there. Okay. In a second, just quickly on the just a methodological point in response also to the question about Trinidad and the US's statement, because the US is classified as indirectly supporting, having mentioned gender equality. The way the tracker works is that we track countries according to their best selves, the nicest, strongest, best thing they've said about gender equality. And in fact, the US's about face on gender is important for us to consider, because if we classify the US according to a statement made under a previous administration, that is not going to reflect its current position. And the United States is not the only country where there is a significant change in national positions. So we need to think about that methodologically. But I would remind everybody that the value of classifying countries according to their best selves is that this is an accountability tool. So we can go to countries and say, hey, you said you were going to do this, or you were going to develop some mechanism or promote a tool or an approach to improve the chances of selecting a woman. Why haven't you done it? On the glass cliff issue, Senator McFedrin, and Ben also mentioned the whole idea of a cliff, that countries are cowering, adjusting their language, and that consensus itself, the role of consensus, could back everybody off a cliff of getting nothing done on this issue. So this is actually a really serious thing we need to think about is the kind of self-destructive or the destructive potential in some of these approaches, these sort of habitual approaches within the UN. On the issue of women being appointed to glass cliffs, to impossible situations, there's a huge amount of research available on this. The students here have produced an annotated bibliography that includes an article on this, and that will be available, right, on their website, where you can look at articles and research showing that there is a tendency amongst private and public sector institutions to finally appoint a woman leader when things have become so hopeless and so late in the day that nobody can fix it. So women are set up to fail. There are also cases of women being appointed in these situations and pulling it all together. But the only way to avoid the glass cliff situation is that a huge legitimacy has to be built up around this next feminist woman secretary general with a huge body of civil society and member state support to make sure that she is not set up to fail and tricked into a terrible situation.
Thank you for that emphasis on the glass cliff situation that we're trying to avoid when we nominate women, not just for the SG position, but for critical high-level position. There was a question from Barbara about how can we identify these candidates? How can civil society identify these candidates that, you know, meet the requirements that we've spoken about? Any thoughts on this, Ambassador?
My thought is that civil society should not get involved in choosing a candidate or even showing their preferences. And even to the region that we want Latin America or Africa or Asia to get a Secretary General. And it will be appropriate not to do that, because then the civil society will divide themselves and there will be no unity among them. Our request to civil society would be, and I'm part of the civil society now, that we just show our wholehearted, full support to the election of a woman, feminist woman Secretary General in 2026. Some people say in near future or something, and that may be till the next term of a man, again, in number 10. So that's why let's avoid that choice of a person.
Thank you, Ambassador. That's a very interesting response. Not nominating particular candidates, but are you then saying present a criteria, but do not present individuals because it will be divisive?
Yes, that is my point, that we go for a woman Secretary General. That is our rallying cry. That is our slogan. That's it.
Thank you. Ben, and then Inday.
Thank you. Just to respond on a couple of the points and add to some of what's been said. So one of the next steps for the tracker is now to start a conversation with member states and use it. We're sending it out to all diplomats. We're asking them if they think that we have their position right. Like, we're open to improving it and we're open to seeing where it goes. We'll continue to identify debates and formal occasions where we can update state positions. So this comes to the position of, you know, the US position is likely to change. And we would love your help in ascertaining what those most likely sort of moments are to study. It's incredibly labor intensive, and kudos to the NYU team for doing so much of the coding work behind this. It's incredibly difficult when you're talking about all the different languages that you have to translate work from and to be rigorous about it. But we're considering opening a route where diplomats can let us know if they think we've got it wrong and can make a public statement or point us at a public statement in order to evolve. their position. So in terms of civil society involvement, we have this resolution from 2023 about states working with civil society with the purpose of identifying potential candidates. It's about sort of sharing the job vacancy, basically, and in making sure that, that it's widely known about and sort of increasing that sort of pipeline for candidates to come in. I actually think that I like the idea of civil society working with candidates and helping to sort of identify candidates. I think that could be quite an enriching process, but I can see you wouldn't want it to become a divisive part of the process, which is why I think it's crucial that we have this civil society scrutiny on candidates in order to sort of to look at what their sort of characteristics and what their position is on different topics. So 1 for 8 billion, last time around we worked and did a civil society analysis on all candidates, and we released data on what their history is with civil society. Have they ever been a civil society? Have they ever had a civil society job? Have they made positive statements to civil society? Do they open up civil society space, or do they actually shun civil society? So we really released that analysis on all candidates last time round. And I think that sort of scrutiny work, which is where journalists and all sorts of other people can come in, it relies on having an open process, which takes us back to why an open process is so crucial. I'll leave it there and hand back to Marit. Thank you.
Thank you. We're over time, but I would like to call on Inday for the last point.
Just quickly, because I think this is very timely now, because we are all here for the 30th anniversary of the World Conference on Women in Beijing. And I think this is a rallying time, and I would call for more action that we should be doing, because women all over the world are coming here. And I think I will build on to what Ambassador Chowdhury was saying. Let's just make a clear rallying call that we want the next Secretary General, a woman, a feminist woman, and that's it. And I think if all the women who are gathered here in the next 2 weeks would sign up a paper, some petition that maybe Global, Mavic and Ben and Anne-Marie, who had been pushing for this for a very long time, that we can all sign up, then we have a momentum. And this is the best time to do it, because by Monday next week, all over the world, women are here, and we want that message very clear, that we want the next Secretary General to be a feminist woman.
Thank you, Inday, for making my job very easy on that point. And as we've heard from our speakers, the leadership of a feminist woman as the next Secretary General is not just desirable, but essential. It is a step forward in redefining global leadership, a step towards a world where justice, equality, sustainable development, and inclusive peace are not just ideals to strive for, but realities we live by. It is time for the United Nations to be led by a feminist woman who stands for women, not just for women, but stands with them and championing a future that reflects the true spirit of equality and cooperation upon which the United Nations was founded. On behalf of the organizers, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, NYU Center for Global Affairs at the School for Professional Studies, and 1.8 billion. Thank you once again to our formidable speakers. And let's give them another round of applause.
This is also not only the 30th anniversary of the Beijing conference, but it is 25th anniversary for 1325.
Yes, indeed, in October. Thank you, Ambassador. And to continue, my thanks to the hardworking graduate students of NYU, to our team at GNWP, Savannah and Sophia, and the rest in different parts of the world who did a lot of behind the scenes work in organizing this event and supporting the research. And to the Baha'i international community, again, for welcoming us. And the biggest thanks go to all of you, our participants here in the room and online, for your enthusiastic participation. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone.
You can find the tracker on the QR code.
Are you?